introduce myself. I'm Jonathan Evans. I'm Chair of the Trustees here at Lyme Museum, and it's my great pleasure and honour to welcome you all here this evening to this preview of the new Mary Anning Comes Home exhibition, and also to the unveiling of our magnificent new specimen of a newly discovered species of crocodilian, which has been kindly donated to the museum and which we're unveiling for the first time this evening. As you may know, this museum stands on the site of Mary Anning's house, and it always amazes me to think that we are now standing where she probably stood all those years ago, and it's great to see that the tradition of fossil hunting that Mary didn't start, but she was very famous for, continues today, and it's great to see so many of the current fossil hunters have joined us this evening, and it's our pleasure to welcome you. The mission of the museum is to inspire people about the astonishing global stories of Lyme Regis, and we aim to enhance and improve our collections, to provide a world-class visitor experience, and to share our collections and knowledge with the world. And we hope that you'll agree that what we're doing tonight ticks all those boxes. There are a lot of people who have worked hard to make this happen, and part of my job is rather like the speech at a wedding. My job is to thank lots of people, so just bear with me for a minute while I do that. First of all, for the donation of this amazing crocodilian, which as I said is a new species never before discovered. This was donated to us by Paul Turner and Lizzie Hinkley, who found it. Lizzie's prepared it. As you'll see, it's been brilliantly prepared, and they've donated to the museum for us to have to show to the public and to the big audience that we have coming through the museum. And Phil Davidson from Charmouth Heritage Centre organised the donation of several other pieces of the fossil which were found by other people, and some of those have kindly been donated to the museum as well. And I'd like to thank Eden Thompson and Lou Fowler for their donations, which you'll also see with the exhibit. And also we have loans of other material from Mike Harrison, from Matt Cape, and from Dan Manning. So thank you to all of you for your loans and donations. As a museum, we recognise the crucial importance of working with the community of expert fossil hunters who follow in Mary's footsteps. And as I said, I'm really pleased that there's so many of you here tonight. As a small museum, it's crucial that we work in partnership with people, not just with fossil collectors, but with partner organisations elsewhere in the country. And it's through working with other organisations that we've managed to bring together some of the things you'll see tonight, not least the portrait of Mary Anning, which is on loan from the Geological Society. And I'd like to thank Anthony Loveland from the Geological Society for his help in organising that loan. And it's the first time that portrait has been seen outside the GeolSoc headquarters in Piccadilly. I hope we'll have more people see the portrait over the next few months while it's on loan here than have seen it through the rest of its history while it's been behind closed doors in a learned society. We also have one of Mary's own discoveries, her own ichthyosaur, on loan to us from the Sedgwick Museum in Cambridge. And I'd like to thank Liz Hyde, the curator of Sedgwick Museum, for her help in arranging that donation and coming tonight to be with us to see the public enjoying it. It's great to have one of Mary's fossils here in the museum. We've had casts of them, we've had imitations of them before, but to actually have one of her fossils here, particularly this weekend, with all that's going on around Mary this weekend, I think is very special, and thank you for your help in organising that. I'd also like to thank the team that's put this together. Our new director, Bridget here, who's been speaking to you in a minute. Bridget started in the new job as director back in January. It's not much time to put this together, and it's been a lot of work to do that. And worked with Paul Davis, our new geology curator, whose relationships with many of these institutions has helped to bring all this together. So thank you to Bridget and Paul for all you've done. And thank you to the wider museum team, who Bridget will be naming, for all your help as well in organising tonight and organising the exhibition. We also have some world experts with us tonight. Professor Hugh Torrens will be talking to us later about Mary Anning and about some of the problems of academia in Dorset. And we also have Tom Sharp, who will be signing some of his books, the Fossil Woman book, later on in the shop if any are interested in that. And we have Dean Lomax from Manchester University, who's a world expert in ichthyosaurs, who will also be talking to us a little bit about ichthyosaurs later, for those of you who can't wait to hear more about that. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Bridget, unless I've forgotten anybody. No?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Bridget, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the museum, and then introduce the other speakers. Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoy the evening.
Hi everybody and welcome. It's absolutely wonderful to see so many people here tonight, and such an example of all the friends and supporters of the museum coming together to help make this event and this exhibition happen. For me, museums are history makers. We take cultural artefacts and moments and use those to enrich people's lives, fire their passions, inspire their creativity and imagination, and I hope that's what Lyme Regis Museum can do for our many visitors. What we have done with the refreshed displays and this new exhibition has been achieved in just over 3 months, which is an incredible achievement for everybody involved. And I would like to thank particularly Anthony Loveland and Caroline Lamb at the Geological Society, and Liz Hyde and Matt Riley from the Sedgwick for pulling it all together for us and going above and beyond. Without their help and support, this exhibition would not have happened. Everyone in my team, staff and volunteers, we're a very small team, and I think we often punch above our weight and people think there are more of us than there actually are. So I'd especially like to thank Paul, who has worked tirelessly on this exhibition and has spent far more time than he's actually paid to do down here over the last few weeks. Chris, who will be hiding at the back somewhere, but we know where you are. Sam, Sue and Paula, who have really pulled together as a team to help support myself, Paul and Chris in keeping the day-to-day running of the museum going while we do all the other bits. And Brian, Zara and Lizzie for all their stalwart help and support and filling in the gaps with all the bits that we have left over. So all those people have made this event happen. For me, this exhibition is the first step in a journey which I hope we can take with all of you to elevate and extend what we do here at the museum with our collections, displays, exhibitions, and to share our brilliant discoveries, your knowledge, passion, and the rich history and culture of Lyme Regis with as many people as possible. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to Hugh Torrens, the preeminent expert on Mary Anning, and we're delighted to have him with us tonight. And then to Dean Lomax, who's the expert on ichthyosaurs, to share their knowledge and their specific insight into these displays tonight.
Well, as a Dorset schoolboy, born in 1940, 3 days before the end of the Battle of Britain, I'm absolutely delighted to be back in Lyme Regis again. I have spent so much of my time in Dorset. It started, I think, in 1956 when I was at school in North Dorset, and I was brought by a wonderful teacher at the school I was at who decided he would encourage me to be a geologist. It wasn't taught in the school. It had never been an A-level subject at the school. But with this encouragement, I passed an A-level having taught myself. And that's, I think, a message for the first message for today. You can do anything you want if you get the right encouragement and the right start. And this is where museums came in. I was at Christchurch in Hampshire then, but now in Dorset. And a wonderful man called John Lavender, who took me under his wing and helped me discover what I was going to do on the planet. Wonderful. So we should be grateful for museum curators. And I'll try and say a little bit about my involvement in the world of museum curation, because it's quite... But first I'll start off with memories. I can't remember when I first got hold of Mary Anning, but the two things I do remember, and I'm here to remember with real passion and delight, John Fowles, the novelist, who was your rescuer as a museum today. He was fantastic. And Liz Ann Borden, who took over, who was an incredible, competent woman, full of guts and spirit and telling the men what they shouldn't be doing. I remember her with great reverence. Anyhow, the first thing that I remember is I was walking up the hill, and I was the man in charge of John Fowles' funeral because of the hills. I can tell you about that if you're interested. We got as far as the post office, John Fowles and I walking past, and a man came out of a dwelling up there and said, you're both in Lyme today. I've got something to show you. And guess what he showed us? He showed us the document that proved that Mary Anning was born on the site of this museum. So it's a fact that had to be discovered. And the idea that facts exist and are there for everybody is complete nonsense. You have to have people who know what they're talking about. The next one I remember was my father's funeral in Bournemouth. He was a refugee from Ireland in the 20s. He decided to come to England with a medical qualification from Dublin. And guess where he chose? The place with the highest death rate in Britain. He thought they might be quite useful doctors. And I was collecting his ashes from the undertakers, and I was too quick. They were still too hot for me to take away. So I had half an hour to spare. And I went into the local bookshop, and there I found a source for the most opinionated statement about Mary Anning from a Lady Sylvester, who was the widow or the husband of the Mayor of London. And she said, what an extraordinary woman, that she has achieved so much in her life to be able to talk to intelligent men. Here I am to prove it. And that's another crusade I have. Mary Anning's achievement is that she's on the list of the Royal Society of London, the oldest learned society in the world, in London. Women who've inspired women to become scientists. And if I think about it, she's on the list, rightly, because she has inspired so many people. I've lectured all over the world about her and on her to foreign audiences: Japan, Brazil, Canada, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Italy. I've travelled all over. I've had a wonderful time doing it. And most of them have had women in my audience saying, how was it possible for a woman in 1810 or 20 to be doing things like this? Because it is still not possible in our own countries for women to be doing this. So the sooner we can get men and women treated equally, the better. And of the 20 on the list, I think it's about 20, Mary Anning's one, and 4 of them at least are members of the Society of Friends, the Quakers, who treat men and women equally. A nice message for us, I think. So, at my father's funeral, I went into the shop in Bournemouth and I found this article, which is in a journal nobody's ever seen, and which is now, I'm afraid, in Oklahoma, because I'm here under false pretenses. I am no longer the expert on Mary Anning. The University of Oklahoma in America have taken my entire archive, and in a magazine article published last month, which I have got somewhere here, but I can't read it because my site is going, it is the first donation in a major history of geology archive which the Americans are funding and finding grants for people to go and study in Oklahoma. It may be redneck country. You may have to not have an abortion when you get there, and you may have to have sexual education to find out why you mustn't have an abortion, but at least it's safe. And I've had a lot of criticism by people saying, why couldn't you find a home for it in England? The answer is I tried bloody hard. I'm a graduate of Oxford, and they agreed to take it all. But some Canadian archivist turned up and said, we've suddenly decided we'll take only the papers of graduates of this university, which includes me. But they weren't about me. They were. The whole thing is complete nonsense. So we need to get our act together in this country and stop telling people we can't do things anymore. The other thing I'm incredibly proud of, and I think Tom Sharp is in our audience, the author of this wonderful new book on Mary Anning. In 1974, we founded the first specialist group for people who worked in British museums as subject specialists. And we founded the Geological Curators Group and produced a journal and a magazine which is still going strong. And you might like to know about that because it's an incredible achievement. Because as soon as we did it, the astronomers, the biologists, the geologists, the penguin hunters, whatever it was, set up a specialist group. Because in those days, there was no means of helping the junior staff in a museum apart from the senior ones who went off to an expensive hotel and said everything was fine in their museum, which is not actually probably likely to be the case. So I'm proud of having involved with that. And my own collection of fossils has gone to Bristol Museum. So I've tried hard to be caring and collecting about specimens in museums. And it was, I think, me that pointed out that the words that people in archaeology use hunters and gatherers, we should honour equally. Mostly it's the gatherers of fossils who give them to the museum who are honoured, and not the collectors, like many of you in this room, who found it, then sold it to somebody else. It's the finder who should be honoured. They had the skills and the ability to know where to look. And the other tribute I would pay in Lyme Regis publicly, I think has probably never been paid before, I'm not sure about this, the skill of the preparators in this town and in Charmouth, using aeroabrasive tools, special tools which they've modified from dental work, my father was a surgeon, are incredible, and we should honour them as well for their part in this revolution which is going on. But my reading is my. But I should say I can steal some thunder from poor old Dean here, because I was the first person to find of the oldest fossil crocodile in Dorset, and it's very embarrassing to have my wife here, because it was in September 1970, which tells you a lot about how long we've known each other. I was driving around on honeymoon in a 1929 sports car, and I suddenly said, "Sorry dear, I've got to go and look at this outcrop." And I came back with the oldest known crocodile snout in Dorset, which is now in the Natural History Museum in London, with a very rude label saying, "Found on honeymoon." Had he nothing better to do? So,
never found this bird before.
Thank you. So we are at least enjoying ourselves. But so I think I'm also trying to pay tribute to the history of our science, the people who found something first and made the discovery which allowed us to know what we're talking about today. It's an ongoing problem, and it's wonderful to be here with this new Plensbachian one which somebody's found, and I honour their achievement, because this happens every day. But what you need to help you is the expertise that goes behind the knowledge which is built up. And here I have a slight problem, and I think I'd ask my audience whether they want me to go on a bit or they've had enough. Because there are some problems in garnering, gathering, discovering and using expertise. Is anybody interested in me going on a little longer? You're sure? Because I don't want to offend anybody, but I have opinions. I'm an old man, and I've seen things going wrong.
There's a fire engine behind you. Be careful.
Oh, we'll put the fire out that way. Well, when I was younger, I was asked what the two best counties in England were, and I said Dorset and Shropshire. And they are beautiful. I've just been driving around my native land, and they are magnificent. But if you think about it, these are the two counties that until extremely recently, they had no universities in them. Universities are funny places. I've been taught at 3 and had fellowships at many more. But expertise exists in universities. And I think there's a problem in Dorset, which I'll talk about very briefly, that we haven't had the ability in a small town like Lyme to know who the actual experts really are. I speak with some feeling about this because I've ended up being qualified as a historian and as a scientist. But my vice-chancellor at my former university would not allow me to do both because they diminished both. What diminishes somebody about being a bit of an expert in more than one subject? Is this what we need? Anyhow, the 3 cases I would like to bring to your attention are, very quickly and very simply, I've long been a member of the Dorset Natural History Society. And I was asked by one of its editors 2 years ago to have an opinion, because I'm an expert on ammonites, which of course occur here. I was asked to have an opinion about a paper to be published in their proceedings. And I wrote a long, detailed report saying this paper is not worth publishing. It adds nothing. It makes claims which are non-existent and not true. The photographs are inadequate, and it is simply not worth publishing. 2 years later, last summer, I found the whole paper in print in the Dorset proceedings. So where's the expertise gone that asked for my opinion and then ignored it? The second one is probably better known to you because it was a letter which turned up from Mary Anning in Commerce in 2019, I think, can't remember. It was sold at auction in London for £100,800 to a man I know well because he's a dealer. But the thing that angered me was that the auctioneers had used my research without naming me and then used it to completely misinterpret the contents of the letter. which was supposed to be about her skill as an expert in large fossils, plesiosaurs, dinosaurs, whatever you want. In fact, they'd misdated it and misinterpreted my research, and they got it completely wrong. So whoever bought it, and I know who it was, got a pig in a poke, because it wasn't what it was claimed to be. So there's another problem involving expertise. And the third one, which is the most embarrassing of all, is that you can hold it up, the Lyme head there, in 2013, it's the big book, thick one, your museum published this wonderful book, The Lymead, which was a manuscript that John Fowles had been given as a gift for his curation of this amazing museum. And some expert had turned up and said, oh, I'm an expert in all this, I'll help you publish it, after John's death, to the extent that in 2013, I think probably nearly my last visit here, I had to talk to the Lyme Regis Society and the friends of this museum at a meeting at which the author of this masterpiece then failed to turn up. I think there were 5 of us in the audience. And the outcome is that that book is not written by the person they think it was, a man. John Fowles and I knew it had to be a woman because he was very good at writing about women, French lieutenant's woman. The thing I remember about John he was proudest of in this museum was the poster for the cinema performance of the French lieutenant's woman, which you'll all see, and it had the French lieutenant's women, which completely blows the story out of the water because there was no other woman than the woman. Anyhow, so expertise again. You know, who put the cinematographer up to reprinting the poster wrongly? And I ended up speaking, I think it was last time I was speaking, in the Masonic Hall perhaps, with 5 of my audience, with a wonderful female chairman of the Friends, I can't remember her name, 2013, in which I pointed out that it was written by the woman whose name appears in pencil on the inside cover. If you can't get better than that. And he says in his book, no trace of this woman could be found in printed sources or online sources. Well, the answer in both cases to misinterpreting things is people should be using not just online sources. If you think it's on the computer screen, and that's all you need to do, you should go somewhere else. With that diatribe, I will finish. I'm delighted to be here. I wish this place the best I can possibly wish. I'm sorry I'm not in very good form. I need a drink for a start. But it is a fantastic place. It's a real treasure. And the last thing I will end up saying, I was involved in the World Heritage Foundation document. And I remember 2 things. Firstly, the invitation to the party celebrating it was sent to a man who was sent in the name of a man who died two years before. So again, find out the facts before you get them wrong. But the commissioner, a New Zealander, said it was the best submission he had ever seen. So this county, this wonderful country, this county Dorset, can do things well when it's got the right means of doing it. But it needs help from expertise, and finding the experts is not as simple as you think. But here is one whom is trustworthy and reliable. Over to you, Dean.
Thank you very much for that, Hugh. It's very, very interesting on many different levels, and several points that I agree with you on, especially on the expertise front. Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you very much to Paul specifically and yourself, Bridget, for inviting me. It's a real honour to be here, and especially to open the Mary Anning Comes Home exhibition alongside Professor Hugh Torrance, who has dedicated much of his career to bringing Mary Anning to the forefront. And sorry to embarrass you with this, of course. Again, I've done this twice now. But Hugh is, of course, one of the people, if not the persons, as well as obviously Tom Sharp as well, who is in the audience, I believe, who has really brought Mary Anning to the forefront to the public. And with that, and bring it round a little bit more to this marine reptile exhibition, I first of all need to really emphasise how interesting and fascinating this Charmouth crocodile specimen is. Now, this was found by Paul Turner and Lizzie Hingley, who I believe should be here somewhere. Sorry to embarrass you, but could we all give a round of applause, please, to Paul and Lizzie? Yeah, thank you very much for donating this specimen, because it's genuinely a really incredibly important specimen, one of the most important marine reptile specimens found along this stretch of coastline in the last 100 plus years. A really, really significant specimen. Now, you might be wondering why exactly that is. And when you go upstairs and take a look at it, you'll be like, What? Is that it? Because it doesn't really look like much, but you've got to look at the finer details. This is quite a small crocodile-like creature that lived around about 190 million years ago. Now, it belongs to a group of these creatures which we call thalattosuchians, bit of a mouthful. Thalattosuchians evolved during the early Jurassic. This specimen is potentially the oldest specimen and most complete of its age anywhere in the world. It's an incredibly important specimen. Now, many thalattosuchians, and if many of you collectors and professionals here will know, one of the most famous specimens is a name that actually has now been considered what we call a wastebasket. It's not really used in scientific terms, although I know some collectors will know this very well, Steniosaurus. Steniosaurus is a type of thalattosuchian that's primarily known from along the Yorkshire coast, but also found in Posidonia Shale in Holsmarden. This is one of the most famous, I guess, world famous types of thalattosuchians, but this animal grew to about 3.5, 4 meters, whereas this little beastie that we have upstairs is probably, I imagine, less than a meter in total length, Paul. Yeah, to 1.5 meters total length. But the interesting thing about this is many thalattosuchians become exclusively adapted to the marine world, so they spend almost all of their life out at sea. Now, we don't know, unlike ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, whether they gave birth to live young or came ashore and laid eggs like turtles, because plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, we're very lucky to have many specimens that have unborn fetuses inside. They're pregnant. So we know that they gave birth to live young. They spent their entire lives out at sea. Some thalattosuchians, we assume, based on the modifications in their fins, which they had basically fins rather than actual feet, we know that they almost certainly spent their entire lives out at sea and perhaps just came ashore maybe a couple of times, maybe to lay eggs. But some of them were terrestrial as well, or semi-aquatic. This new specimen is very important because it's right at the beginning of the evolutionary origins of this group. Now, that is incredibly important, especially for probably a handful, maybe 10 people in the entire world who are super, super excited by this. I probably would be one of those people. But this is such an important thing because it helps us to understand the evolutionary relationships of the early, what we call crocodilomorphs. That's the bigger group, which includes true crocodilians, like we see today, and also these croc-like creatures, thalattosuchians. So for that point, it's really, really important. And again, thank you very much to Paul and to Lizzie for your generosity for donating this specimen. Thank you very much. Now, of course, talking about advancing science, there are several other specimens in here, including, as Jonathan mentioned, the ichthyosaurus breviceps specimen. It's amazing to have one of Mary Anning's specimens in this museum. That's incredibly important for several different reasons. But this one I know particularly well. So I have gone into paleontology quite an untraditional route, and actually much like Hugh, my career was based on pretty much following my passion. As a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, to live out my childhood dream, and so I ended up working a bunch of jobs I didn't like. I sold many of my possessions, including my beloved Star Wars collection, when I was 18 to travel out to Wyoming. And whilst in Wyoming, I went to go and dig up dinosaurs on a 4-month-long trip, where I happened to bump into, serendipitously, a marine reptile expert called Professor Judy Massere. Now, Judy and I hit it off really well. She saw this 18-year-old kid who was really, like, oh, I want to be a paleontologist, I want to do this, I want to do that. Judy encouraged me to continue to pursue my passion. And when I returned home to my hometown of Doncaster, I happened upon, I started to volunteer at my local museum, which I used to visit as a kid, Doncaster Museum and Art Gallery, and happened upon an ichthyosaur in the collection. Now, this ichthyosaur is about total length of about 5 feet. And this specimen was particularly interesting because the museum staff, they thought it was a plaster copy. Now, I went into the museum, saw this specimen as an 18-year-old, just come back from this dino dig in Wyoming, and I said, oh, this can't be a plaster copy, I'm confident this is real. And they said, well, it can't be, we let children draw on this. So you imagine my surprise, no, stop that. So they stopped it immediately, had it taken out, we had it cleaned up, and that turned out to be the holotype of Ichthyosaurus anningae. So the very first ichthyosaur named after Mary Anning anywhere in the world, over 200 years later, was named by me and Professor Massere in 2015, and that became the holotype, so quite an incredible story. And the specimen that we have upstairs, this Ichthyosaurus breviceps, after I met Judy, we went on a tour across the UK and in several museums in the US, And we found this specimen, well, I say we found, it was in the collections of the Sedgwick Museum when nobody had really looked at this for such a long time, until Julie and I, we saw it and said, oh, this is really interesting. Realised it's a Mary Anning specimen, but we found out that it's a type of a species called ichthyosaur breviceps, and that species is known from roughly about 30 specimens. Well, this turns out to be one of the most complete. It has the most complete pelvis of any breviceps known, and it's the largest at about 1.6 metres long. And it was sold by Mary Anning in 1832 to the Sedgwick Museum. So it's very cool to see it come back here. And before I finish rambling away, there are a couple of other specimens that are on display as well. There is a potential Ichthyosaurus anningae that was recently acquired by the Friends of the Museum. Thank you very much to the Friends for raising the funds and yeah, clap for that, please. Thank you very much for acquiring that specimen. It'll be interesting to research that going forward. And also there is a specimen on loan from Paddy Howe of another Ichthyosaurus breviceps that the museum are trying to raise funds for at the moment to acquire. And on that point, I really need to stress the fact that the Lyme Regis Museum, they really hope going forward for the future, they really hope to acquire more scientifically important specimens. And from a professional perspective, and somebody who works on ichthyosaurs and marine reptiles generally, this museum is a fantastic, it's a cathedral of science here. You have some of the most important collections here. It's a real epicenter for this stretch of the coastline, and it has vitally significant specimens. And I really hope that several people in this room, appreciate what you have here. It is a fantastic museum, and I hope that more specimens of scientifically important nature will be not only donated, but hopefully can be acquired in the future. And with that, thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy seeing the displays.
So I had one job, which was to thank people, and Dean managed, I know Paul's minutes, Dean managed to remind me that I forgot one of the most important ones. I also wanted to thank the Friends for all their support for the exhibition tonight. The Friends have donated very generously to both the preparation of the croc, but also to allow us to bring the loans here of both the portrait and the ichthyosaur. And I would like to thank David Cox and the committee of the Friends for all the support they've given us in allowing this to happen. And I'm very sorry that I forgot it in my earlier speech. And now I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to finish off the evening.
Well, mine's going to be remarkably brief, you'll be happy to know, but it follows on from Dean's. And it sort of follows on from Hugh's as well. I mean, it has been said that I'm an expert in the geology and paleontology of this part, but all of that has been based on the work of collectors. And if Mary Anning has taught us anything, it is those collectors that are the lifeblood of the museums and the scientific research, wherever it happens. When I arrived, one of the things that I really want to do, and why so many collectors are here today, is because the museum wants to work with you, the collectors of the material. We, as a museum, would die without that material. And even if it is on loan or borrowed so we can see it and develop it and pass it on to people like Dean, so he can look at it and actually have a knowledge of that material so his research can move forward. So the reason for having so many collectors here is because I want to work, and the museum wants to work with you going forward. Museums work because they have only work when they have three things. They have stuff, okay, which technically called collections, so just not to. People, there's your expertise, Hugh. And the final thing is context, which everybody else, the reason that Lyme Museum works and the Heritage Centre works at Charmouth is because what we have more than anywhere else is the context for that material. I mean, the site of Mary's house, you can see the site of where that crocodile that Dean's been talking about through the window. That makes it much more valuable. And if you bring all those three things together, you have the most important thing that we can do for this part of the coast and the World Heritage Site and preserving that heritage. And that's it. That's why I've invited so many collectors here. We want to work with you. I'm going to try and get to talk to as many of you as possible. It might not be possible, but now you know what it will look like if you've not seen me before, but I think quite a lot of you have seen me before. Thank that. Thanks very much. I'm back to Bridget.
Thank you, everyone. everyone. We're now going to let you go and do the best part of the evening, which is to look at the exhibits and the portrait of Mary Anning.